Okay, let's talk about 2020. But first, I need to say that I am a history major. I have studied many different historical events in the past. I don't know everything, I'm not an expert, but I know a fair amount about stuff that I will be talking about. All right, so 2020. It's not even June, and so much stuff has happened. And I have made the connection that 2020 is quite similar to 1968. And 68 is deemed as one of the most turbulent years, if not the most turbulent year in U.S. history. Now, here's why. In January in 1968, we started the year off with the Tet Offensive in the Vietnam War. It's basically just a massive offensive by the Vietnamese, and the war was escalated, right? In April, during Holy Week, MLK was assassinated, right? And as a result, there were nationwide riots. So remember that. In June, Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated after winning the Democratic primary in California, right? And to top it all off, 1968 was an election year, and who was elected? Richard Nixon, right? So now that we've gotten that away, and now that we've gone over that, let's talk about 2020 so far. So we started the year off with thinking that we were about to go into World War III with Iran. That obviously did not happen. And then on January 26th, we lost Kobe Bryant and 8 others in a helicopter crash near Los Angeles. And then here comes March, and the pandemic makes landfall in the US, and a bunch of states start ordering their lockdowns and their stay-at-home orders, right? So enter in April and May, and we have many different cases of just blatant police violence and police brutality towards people of color. You have Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and now George Floyd. And amongst all of that, there are many cases of people calling the cops on black people when they were not doing anything because they knew that the cops would take their side and either arrest the person of color or who knows. But this has been happening for the last 2 months. This has been happening for a while now. And for the last 3 nights, or I think 5 nights now, we have had nationwide protests. And I just have to say that these protests and the fact that they're so nationwide is almost completely unprecedented. The last time we even had this many protests nationwide, and when I say nationwide, I actually mean nationwide. There are protests in the Bay Area, there are protests in LA, there are protests in San Diego, there are protests in Seattle, Portland, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, Chicago, New York City, Florida cities, Wilmington, Delaware. I mean, there are protests nationwide here, and I'm definitely forgetting some big ones. Philadelphia, DC. I'm forgetting a bunch. We have not had this many nationwide protests ever. The last time that we had this many protests was in 1968. Like I said, after MLK died. After he was assassinated, there were numerous riots in Chicago, Kansas City, New York City, DC, and I might be forgetting another one, but those were the pretty big ones. DC was especially hit hard by these riots in 68, with not the majority, but a lot of storefronts being burned down. And fast forward over 50 years to 2020, and we saw exactly that same thing last night. There were I don't know how many fires there were in DC, but there was one really big one. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because change over time in history is such a it's a key part, it's a key aspect of history, right? The fact that if you talk to the civil rights leaders who are still alive to this day, the fact that they are saying that what they fought for in the 60s is exactly the same thing that we are fighting for right now, it demonstrates that there has been almost no change whatsoever, right? And it's it's blatantly sad. It's blatantly sad that for 50 years, this police brutality, this police violence, just oppression by the system has been happening. And some people might say that, oh, why is it happening? Why is it happening all right now? Why are there so many cases of police brutality in the last 10, 20 years? Well, in the last 10 to 20 years, we are in the digital age, right? And everyone has a cell phone, and so they have a camera. So in the last 10 to 20, 30 years, everyone has that ability to record these instances of police brutality. Back in 1992 with the Rodney King riots, the reason why everyone was so mad is because this was relatively the first time that police brutality was caught on camera, and the cops all got acquitted, right? And then you go over the years, you hear all the different names, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner. It's just everyone. There are so police brutality has been happening for a while now. It's nothing new. The only new thing is that people have been recording them now. And I would argue that police brutality has been going on ever since 1865. And why not earlier than 1865? The reason why is because slavery is pretty much just police brutality. Police brutality is slavery in everything but the name and the fact that people of color are not being traded as slaves. They're being treated as slaves pretty much by a blatantly broken system, a blatantly oppressive and racist system, I'll add. And I want to finish everything up by saying that I'm worried that once all of this is done, once all the riots and protests are done, and they will be done, I'm just worried that once they are all completely done, that nothing will happen, and that we will have gone through so much pain and anger and frustration, and just nothing will have happened, right? And the only way that I can think of that we can legitimately cement the change that we want, and we can actually enact the change that we want, is to vote in November. And while, yes, voting is oftentimes, it seems like it does nothing, which it's true. The voting is not as great of an opportunity as it could be, but nonetheless, it is an opportunity that we have, and I think we should take that opportunity to enact the change that we want to make. So, all in all, 2020 is unprecedented. It is very much like 1968, but at a far larger scale. And if we want to actually enact the change that we want to happen, then we should vote in November.